Hi everybody, welcome back. I thought I'd make another video about the eVTOLs in Microsoft Flight Sim, as I've learned a little bit more about how they work with a HOTAS controller setup in VR or with an Xbox controller. So I'm going to be looking at only these two, the Archer Midnight and the Joby S4, because they both have this transition to conventional flight mode. The Volocopter and the Jetson 1 are much more like a drone to fly, and these have this interesting combination. So we'll start with the Archer, and I'm going to take off from Clydebank here in Glasgow, Scotland, which is close to where I grew up, so I know the area quite well. That's live weather. I just recorded this whole video with live weather and it was a bit too bad. So what we'll do is we'll switch it to, we'll switch it to a preset. Let's do something that's a little bit more like Scotland. So yeah, I'm flying this with an Xbox controller. I recommend that as the best control mechanism for this aircraft. As you'll see, the left joystick controls the right stick there, and a combination of the buttons, so A and B, will control the forwards and backwards, and the triggers left and right will control that, what you'll see as yaw motion later. It changes. It's a little bit complicated, let's put it that way. So to start it up, it's dead easy. We get this control over here on the left. I'm just going to slide over for you. So this is basically the aircraft mode, and we switch it on to on actually there. I'll switch it on to ground, and you'll see why in a minute. The Garmins basically start to set themselves up, and we're going to start this right-hand Garmin up, which basically is the proprietary control scheme for this type of aircraft. Now, one of the coolest things we can do, we can actually get out and do this, is you can walk up to this panel here and it will put out a charger, which is, funnily enough, internal combustion engine. By the sounds of it, you'll hear a little kind of generator sound. And one of the cool things that I learned is on this left-hand screen here, you can click on Sim Actions. You'll see that the charger is plugged in, and you can actually change the rate of charge there. So 1x is like the realistic charge rate. We can put it up here to 32, which is the highest. And you'll see there that that charges up more or less instantly. So let's get it up to about 120, unplug it. This puts away that charger and the cables. It's kind of an animated prefab there. We can see that our systems have booted up now and we're ready to fly. So as I said before, we are still in ground mode. Let's just slide across. So as long as we're in ground mode, moving the joysticks, won't do anything. And the way we're going to fly this is the left stick, which is mapped to the right one, controls are up and down. So you can see there, it's mirrored here. When it's in vertical takeoff mode, which it is by default, so we can see it does this test. The engines go into the vertical mode at the front. When it's in vertical takeoff mode, which is, as I said, the default, pulling back on the left stick on your Xbox controller or your joystick, if you're in HOTAS, will just make you hover directly straight up, and that will make you hover directly down. Once we've transitioned into forward flight or conventional flight, the controls change. It's a little bit confusing. So what we're going to do now is just take off. We put this into fly mode, and then I'll reset my view, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here so you might be able to see the props. So the props go through this cycle. They go down, then they go back up again, but you can actually directly pull back on your joystick or your left stick on the Xbox controller, and you'll see that those props immediately spool up and you take off. So as long as those batteries are connected, you're in fly mode. So I'm very gently pulling back now, fully back on the joystick or the left joystick on the Xbox controller. And as you can see, you hover straight up. So by default, it's got this kind of autopilot in its control system here. It's in hover mode and it's in hold, which means it will hold its position just like a drone. It's probably using GPS, and it's basically holding its position exactly over that pad. As long as it's not too windy, you can just go straight up and down. You know that you're over that pad. If it's very windy, it will, like a drone, it will drift off position. Now, this is what changes a little bit later. So in hover mode, your left and right trigger are mapped to that left stick. And these transition you in a straight line, as you can see, left and right. Above, holding down the right trigger, it just moves you to the right there. And this is mapped to the rudder. So if you've got rudder pedals, that will move you left and right in hover mode. And now your joystick will, the left joystick on the Xbox controller will yaw. And again, it will do your vertical up and down, as we saw there before. Now, the way you fly these things, I've just watched the Scott Manley video about Archer Aviation and kind of confirmed that you do actually fly it like in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. So you take off, you don't need to get really high. It's, you know, a helicopter, you probably get even higher, or there may be rules about how high you need to go before you transition to forward flight. But I guess it's the pilot's instinct to get some height. But on this kind of aircraft, you simply want to transition to acceleration mode. So this particular aircraft has this button on the left-hand stick. It's mapped by default to flaps extend and retract. So if you've got flaps mapped on your HOTAS, you use the flaps retract button, as far as I remember, or up on the Xbox controller. And if you look at this display here, it will switch from hold mode to acceleration mode. So you can see there, accel, and it immediately goes into mode where these propellers are transitioning forward. It's using the back propellers and the thrust to keep it at exactly the same flight level. So it's not dropping at all if you look at that vertical speed indicator on the right. And as you can see here, we're accelerating quite quickly, and it goes into, as you can see just about there, it's set to 96 knots. And now we're basically flying a conventional aircraft. You can see the vertical speed there is more or less zero. If I pull back on my joystick, again the left stick on Xbox, you'll see nose goes up and we go into climb. And I can be quite aggressive on this, and we'll see what happens is that these, as I pull back there, these motors may even transition into tilted to kind of keep that climb rate there. It's about 1500 as far as I remember. So you can see the speed slows down. So it might actually go back into hover mode, but if you catch it, so let's pull down there, but do about 40 knots, and at 40 knots it's using all the propellers to keep you in the air, but it's not automatically gone into hover mode. So if you slow it down aerodynamically like that, it will go into hover mode. Right, I haven't touched the throttles at all I did was acceleration mode, and it automatically goes up to that speed which is set there, 96 knots. Effectively, it's on autopilot mode. So your throttles, and this is where a HOTAS setup doesn't work very well, because the HOTAS is using an axis for the throttle. By default, on the Xbox controller, A will push that left stick forward, and now you're basically increasing the autopilot speed setting. So if I let go of it at 112 knots, it will set the speed hold to 112 knots, wherever it was when you let go of the button. What I found with the HOTAS, when you've got the throttle mapped to an axis, is if you move it slowly forward, it will increase. But at some point, you reach the stop of the throttle, and then you cannot increase the speed anymore. But as you can see here, I'm holding that left joystick forward, which is A on the Xbox controller, and she will go up to, I don't know, 130. You can see there the cruise speed, the VC, it's just there visible on the speed tape, is at 119, 18 knots, but she will go up to about 130 slowly. So this is really reaching kind of maximum speed there. So I'm holding A down, I let go, and now she'll do her best to stick at that 129 knots. So you can see the back props are stopped completely. They're feathered as well as can be, and you're flying along here with a pretty good cruise speed. You'll also see down here where my cursor is just now, CTOL range is like 64 nautical miles, which is pretty good. And yeah, we're flying down the River Clyde here, turning into from the river back there into the Firth. Just so you know, that's Glasgow back there. Dumbarton Rock, that is where Shiva's Regal sit over there. There's a bunch of unglamorous warehouses. And being Scotland, there's a lot of golf courses. This is a very nice place called Lang Bank. Yeah. So we go into that conventional flight mode, and your joystick or your left stick now flies the aircraft pretty normally. And quite interestingly is if I go into a dive like this, the autopilot is throttling back these motors. You'll see that the torque there goes to 0. So it's trying to keep you at that 130 knots that you've set. So you can effectively dive down like this, say in a more easy way. You don't need to manage the power. But as you can see there, we're getting up to the critical speed. So I'm going to hold down B. That's going to slow us down even more. So we're set to 130 knots there. Yeah, so slowing down obviously doesn't work when you're diving down like this. So if I bring her up to more or less a level flight, and I hit the B button, or if I move my throttle backwards, you can see that she slows down quite quickly, and as soon as I let go, the autopilot kicks in again and does a speed hold. One thing I was going to say about the HOTAS, that axis for a throttle really doesn't work on this aircraft. I recommend you map just for this Archer aircraft buttons for forward and for your flaps basically. No, sorry, for throttle. Yeah, I would map buttons for your throttle increase and throttle decrease just for this aircraft. That will help you. The other thing is that this mode here is really important. It's mapped to flaps, again, as a reminder. This is very important. You use it a lot because you use it to transition from conventional flight like this to hover mode. So I'm going to do this coming up to the ships here. So I'm going to hit flaps down or down on the D-pad, and you'll see that that speed hold turns into decelerate, and you'll see that the aircraft decelerates very quickly unless you're flying down. The vertical speed stays as it was set before, so you don't need to do anything there. So if you're diving down, it will stay going down. But you want to just have a kind of nice flat flight profile. You can see there, oh, I must have touched something, so you might need to hit that deceleration again. If you hit one of your controls, it disconnects the autopilot as far as I can tell. So you can see it decelerates, and by default, or as far as I can tell, it decelerates to 0 speed. It's in hover mode now, so you can see this HVR on that display under my cursor. And again, if you hit the A button, so your throttle increase button, it will increase to, I think it's about 30 knots in hover mode. So this gives you basically a slow kind of loiter mode. And the weird thing about this aircraft is that left and right on your joystick, it's normally roll, but as the aircraft transitions into this hover mode, you'll see that it changes into yaw. And that's one thing I don't find very intuitive. But again, the control systems of the aircraft, the autopilot, if you like, is trying to control that. So left stick, and it's rolling and yawing a little bit. And when you're in hover mode, that left stick in the aircraft, or your rudder pedals, does this kind of lateral translation. So again, I'm at 20 odd knots in hover mode. I hit down flaps or down on the D-pad, and it will go into deceleration mode, and I'll stop, and then I'm using that joystick, main joystick on your HOTAS setup, left joystick, and we'll go vertically down like this. And then you land. Again, so just to repeat, you start off in hover mode, you use your main joystick or left stick on Xbox. Once you're at a height that you can avoid buildings, you hit flaps up or up on the Xbox D-pad, flaps up on whatever you've got mapped on your HOTAS setup, and she'll go into acceleration mode and she'll accelerate all the way up to 96 knots. So I think the Archer's is a bit more of a pilot's aircraft. There's a little bit more agency. So you've got this throttle up and down, you've got this mode. I personally like it as a pilot more than the other aircraft, because it gives me, I think, slightly more control. But its transition between yaw and strafe, the rudder, is confusing for me. I couldn't see in Scott Manley's video if that's really how that works, but hopefully this video will help you get it flying, whether you've got a HOTAS setup or you've got a Xbox controller. But as I said, it's very well set up for Xbox out of the box. So a quick look at the Joby, which is a little bit more set up for HOTAS by default. So let's just fly. Oh no, that's okay. I should have started in the same situation. So again, let's just do that properly. So we started in the cloudy skies. I'm hitting escape.
Glasgow approach Joby Golf. Yankee Papa Uniform Golf is type Joby JAS for 6 miles southeast of Echo Golf Foxtrot Bravo Lima 1,600 feet.
Even more Scottish. No, actually, forgive me. Shouldn't take long. I'll pause the video. Sorry about that. So I just paused it so that we start on a helipad, basically the same conditions as the Archer. See, this is the real weather in Scotland just now. And I'm going to change it back to preset so we can see where we are. This is Coolport, which is the nuclear base in the submarine base in Scotland. Okay, so we're in the Joby. It's slightly different. By default, it's all started up. We've got this screen on the left-hand side here, which is the proprietary Joby control system. On the right-hand side, more of a traditional Garmin setup. So this aircraft, if I go outside, I'm going to fly this with an Xbox controller again. It's a similar setup, less props, less engines, but they can all rotate, as you can see here. If I go back inside, the most important thing is to keep an eye on these hover controls. So this is hover mode. This tells you that in which direction, the vector that the aircraft is moving in. And this tells you what your controls are set to. So it's set to neutral just now, and we're not going anywhere, as you can see here. So to get started, so this aircraft can charge as well, just in case you want to see how to do that. You go to Sim Actions, you can hit plugged there, and you can charge your battery again at the same 32x rate there. We can turn it off. You are supposed to turn it into load mode, and this basically allows you to move the joysticks without flying the aircraft, as you can see there. So left joystick, or your main joystick, controls that right joystick there. Your rudder pedals twist that joystick there, and they are always yaw, as far as I remember, in this aircraft, so they don't transition. And then this one's got a more traditional throttle here, so forwards, backwards. So this maps directly to HOTAS very well, actually. So you'll see your throttle, when I'm moving that, is changing this tiny blue dot there. It's probably hard to see in my video because of the res, and you want that to be in the middle. So I'm using B and A on Xbox by default, which you'll know is mapped to throttle. If you've got a throttle axis mapped, it will move that around as well. So you want it to be, make sure it's in the middle. Like that. We're going to then turn it on to fly mode. This turns red. And yeah, basic idea, control mechanism is, again, pull back on your joystick, the left stick in an Xbox controller, and you will fly straight up. And again, it's a gyro stabilized aircraft, so it tries to keep its position, I guess, with GPS like a DJI drone, and you'll fly up and down vertically. As you can see my joystick there, pull back, go forwards. Rudder, in this case, does yaw, and it's stuck. You know, it doesn't transition like the Archer. And then your roll left and right on your main joystick will give you a lateral transition. And you can see all of this on this control here. I'm going to zoom in on it for you for a second. So full left stick, you'll see that the speed of the aircraft is indicated by this one. Full right stick, neutral, and then to the right. So this tells you actually what the aircraft is doing. So pull back, and then this, oh yeah, the white dot there is showing you if she's going up. She's still going up, now going down. Now, this bit in the middle is really important. So I'm going to throttle up. So this is basically moving that throttle forward. So I throttle up, it stops there at fly, and it transitions into a fly mode. So you'll see that these props start to rotate here. And again, it will stay neutral. It won't drop out the sky like a normal aircraft will, or you know, a Harrier jump jet or something that you need to manage. It simply holds its flight level and transitions into a forward flight. So this is a faster aircraft. You'll see that she does 60 knots, and when she's in forward flight mode, she flies very nicely. Again, traditional. This aircraft I saw is a Joby Toyota partnership. It's quite interesting. Following this aircraft company as well, it's public. So the difference here is, instead of using the flap to transition from forward flight mode, we're just using the throttle here. So if I press B, you'll see that this blue dot goes back, which is like a negative speed control, if you like, or we've got negative acceleration. And you'll see that it just transitions into hover mode automatically. So it'll come into this yellow, which is kind of a critical airspeed. Once it's red, you'll see that those props fully translate there into vertical. Now if I keep it back like this, you'll see that that should move behind. So we're going to be stopped once it's in the middle. And it'll actually go into a backwards hover. So in hover mode, you want to use your throttle and get that blue dot over the middle. And this is how you stop the aircraft dead stopped. So now all our instruments are indicating that we're stopped. We can hover directly up and down using that stick. So it's a little bit different control scheme, and you need to keep your eye on that blue dot there. So again, if I move this forward and I don't move it all the way to the top, so I'm just tapping A, you could do this with your HOTAS as well. Just move it slightly forward on the throttle axis. This is still in hover mode, so she's doing about 11 knots. And this is how you do fine movement. So you're moving your throttle back and forward within that mode. It's only when it goes clicks it basically into this forward indent that she's in fly mode, and she'll accelerate all the way up to that 160 knots initially. But you can control the speed in forward mode. So I'm just going to let her fly. Let's go outside. Let's do that transition. 60, 70 knots. So she's in fly mode. You can see this less visible in this. We can put our controls back to neutral. Basically, that means she'll hold the speed. So again, it's like it's a autopilot mode, as you can see your speed when it's in the middle. And if I want to slow down a bit, I move my throttle back or press B a bit. She's now going into accelerate. And I can move this forward, and it will hold at that speed again. So that's how we control our forward flight speed once we're in flight mode or normal mode. There we go. So I'm just tapping that. That's right. And again, you put it all the way back and she'll automatically transition into hover mode. So I can do some interesting maneuvers like this. I can stick the nose down. She's trying to accelerate, but gravity is making us accelerate a lot. So still in full back mode. And what she'll do is I come in here. Once we get some resistance, she'll slow down very quickly. So we'll pull out here. And she'll translate into hover mode. So once you get used to that, this time it takes to do that transition, you can do quite cool stuff. Remember, she's in full back mode. So I need to catch this as she gets to 0. Put it in that middle spot and she'll stop. And this all works with, let's say, pretty strong winds. There is a limit to it, just like a drone, where basically the control mechanism won't work. I've flown her in a lot of storms, so there is a limit to that. So then we'd transition forward here. Let's find the beach. There's probably a beach here. So you can be very detailed in your control. It's easy to fly once you know how, but there were no instruction books. So there's no beach here. Let's try and land there. So I've got it in the middle. That's the right one. Middle, red dot. That's it. Now I just push forward and land her there. So you can do very precise flight controls on this aircraft. That's it. I hope you enjoy it and have fun flying these aircraft. Bye for now.